You've just handed over $50,000, signed the waiver, packed your oxygen bottles, flown halfway around the world. And now, you're standing at the edge of something most people can't even comprehend. Above you, clouds race like ghosts over jagged spires. The wind doesn't howl, it screams. And every breath feels like drowning on dry land. This isn't just a climb, it's a calculated gamble with death. Here, above 8,000 meters, your body isn't surviving. It's dying. Slowly. Invisibly, relentlessly. The locals call it the death zone because up here, oxygen is a memory and time is a thief. You take a step, then another. Your legs shake, your hands go numb. The summit is still hours away, but you're already fading. They told you it was dangerous. They told you about the statistics, the frozen corpses, the broken dreams, but you still came. And maybe that's what makes it beautiful. 11 climbers once died here in a single day. One man who survived Everest's deadliest storm lost his life on this mountain just a year later. Some say it's madness, others call it glory, but all of them, every last one, understood one thing. Up here, the mountain doesn't care if you make it. So the question remains, why do people spend $50,000 to die in the death zone? Every year, they come. From crowded cities and quiet suburbs, from Wall Street offices and remote mountain villages, they all arrive at the foot of giants. Eyes full of wonder, hearts full of fire, and somewhere deep inside them, a question they can't shake. What if I make it? It's easy to think this is just about climbing, but it's not. This is about standing where few have stood, about proving, if only to yourself, that you are still alive. You can't fake it up here. There are no filters, no second takes. Every mistake is permanent. Every choice echoes in ice. On Everest, they wait in line. Take selfies near the summit, with supplemental oxygen hissing softly at their sides. But on Annapurna, on K2, there are no crowds. There's no safety net. Just the wind, the silence, and the knowledge that this mountain has buried better men than you. Annapurna has the numbers to prove it. For every 5 climbers who reach the summit, 1 dies. That's not a risk. That's a roll of the dice with death itself. K2 isn't kinder. They call it the Savage Mountain because it doesn't make deals. Storms appear out of nowhere. Ropes vanish under fresh snow. Even the strong come back broken, if they come back at all. So why do they come? Maybe it's because modern life is too soft. Because we spend our days chasing promotions and notifications. And somewhere along the way, we forget what it means to hurt for something real. Or maybe it's simpler. Maybe some people just need to know what they're made of. To stare into the abyss and keep climbing. Because for them, the summit isn't just a point on a map, it's a reckoning. And even if it costs $50,000, and even if it costs everything, they'll pay the price. Annapurna doesn't roar like K2. It doesn't shout from the rooftops like Everest. It whispers. But those whispers carry death. At first glance, it's beautiful. Soft white ridgelines gleaming under the sun, towering over deep green valleys. To the untrained eye, it looks almost peaceful. But to those who know it, it's something else entirely. Annapurna is 8,091 meters tall, the 10th highest mountain in the world. And yet, it's more feared than any other. They call it the deadliest 8,000er. And it earns that title quietly. For decades, the fatality rate on Annapurna hovered near 32%. 1 in 3 climbers who reached the top never came back. It wasn't a question of if the mountain would take someone. It was when and who. That's what makes it so terrifying. Not the height, not the fame, but the silence, the waiting. People don't climb Annapurna by accident. It's not Everest with long lines and crowded base camps. It's not K2 with its blunt brutality. Annapurna is something different. It doesn't crush you in public. It disappears you in solitude. It's selective, personal, a slow, cold, perfect storm wrapped in snow and reverence. And yet, people go. Not many, but enough. Because those who understand the danger also understand the beauty. And that combination is irresistible. The first man to reach the top of Annapurna was Maurice Herzog. It was 1950. No one had ever climbed above 8,000 meters before. No maps, no satellite weather, no backup, just instinct, courage, and desperation. Herzog's team didn't even know which route would work until they were already on the mountain. They climbed blindly through snowstorms and shifting ice. And somehow, they made it. He reached the summit. Then, the mountain made him pay. On the way down, Herzog lost his gloves. His hands froze into blocks of ice. So did his feet. By the time he returned to France, he had no fingers, no toes, just a blank stare and a book in his hands. He called it Annapurna, and it became the best-selling mountaineering book of all time. But those who read it for inspiration missed the point. Herzog survived, but he never truly returned. The mountain changed him, disfigured him, and yet, in a strange way, it gave him something too. Immortality. Since that day, every climber who has come to Annapurna knows this. Reaching the summit is possible. But coming home is a different story. Annapurna doesn't play by the rules of other mountains. Its slopes shift, its cornices collapse. Its avalanches come silently, then all at once. There's no pattern, no rhythm, only luck. Some climbers spend years waiting for the perfect window. A moment of stable weather, a break in the snow. But Annapurna doesn't reward patience. Sometimes, it punishes it. It's not a mountain that forgives mistakes, and it never forgets who's trespassing. In 1996, Anatoly Bakriv became a legend. A storm hit Everest. People were dying in the dark, oxygen running out, radios dead. But Bakriv went back up, alone, in hurricane-force winds, and pulled 3 climbers out of the death zone. He didn't wait for praise. He didn't ask for recognition. He just did what needed to be done. A year later, he stood at the base of Annapurna, the hero of Everest, one of the strongest climbers on Earth, and he never came down. It was Christmas Day, 1997. An avalanche struck without warning. Bakriv and his climbing partner, Dmitry Sobolev, were gone in seconds. No rescue, no recovery, just silence. That's Annapurna. It doesn't care what you've survived. It doesn't care how strong you are. It will bury you, with or without a storm. And it has. Dozens of experienced climbers have died on its slopes. Some were elite alpinists, others were just unlucky. Even the best are only visitors here. And then, there are the trekkers. Not climbers, not summiting, just walking the trails. In 2014, a snowstorm hit the Annapurna region. It wasn't supposed to. The forecast was wrong. 43 people died in a single day. That's the cruelty of Annapurna. It doesn't just take climbers, it takes anyone in its path. And still, they keep coming. Because danger like this holds a strange kind of beauty. The south face of Annapurna is one of the most feared walls in mountaineering. 3,000 vertical meters of unstable snow, sheer rock, and hanging ice. It's not just dangerous, it's legendary. This face has taken lives, but it has also built myths. In 2013, Ueli Stek returned to Annapurna for the 3rd time. He'd failed twice before, but this time, he came alone. No ropes, no team, no margin for error, just him, his gear, and a wall of death. He climbed through the night, navigating collapsing seracs and slabs of black ice. No backup, no communications, just wind, cold, and darkness. 28 hours later, he returned to base camp. Alive, exhausted, changed. He said he'd reached the summit. Some believed him, others didn't. But those who have stood in the shadow of that wall know what it takes and what it costs. Stek once said, "Speed is not the goal, the experience is." But speed was part of his magic, and Annapurna was his masterpiece. He would die a few years later on Nuptse, training for Everest. But his climb on Annapurna still echoes, because it showed what's possible when you strip a climb down to its essence. Just man versus mountain. That's the thing about Annapurna. It doesn't offer glory, it offers truth. Only 365 people have ever stood on its summit. 72 never came back. And when you're standing up there, staring across the sky, you don't feel victorious. You feel humbled, because you know it could have gone the other way. And for most, it has. K2 doesn't pretend to be kind. It doesn't hide its danger behind beauty like Annapurna. It stands in the Karakoram like a frozen blade, jagged, sharp, and unapologetically lethal. At 8,611 meters, it's the 2nd highest mountain in the world. But almost everyone who's climbed both will tell you the same thing. K2 is harder, harsher, meaner. The nickname says it all, the Savage Mountain. That name came from George Bell, a member of a 1953 expedition. He barely made it back down alive. When they asked him what it was like, he said, "It's a savage mountain that tries to kill you." And he was right. K2 has a death rate nearly 4 times that of Everest. It's not just the altitude, it's the weather. Winds reach hurricane force. Storms appear out of nowhere and trap climbers for days. One moment you're moving, the next you're stuck at 8,000 meters with no food, no oxygen, and no chance. There are no easy routes, no gentle slopes, just ice falls, rock walls, and one narrow window of opportunity that closes fast. Climbers know what they're signing up for. They know that K2 has claimed nearly 100 lives, and still, they go. Because standing on top of K2 means more than just reaching the summit. It means you outlasted the storm. You faced the mountain's fury and lived to tell the tale. But most never do. There's a place on K2 that haunts even the boldest climbers. A stretch so narrow, so steep, so fragile. It's where most of the bodies lie. It's called the bottleneck. Just below the summit, this narrow couloir is guarded by a massive overhanging serac, an unstable wall of ice, poised to collapse without warning. Climbers must pass directly beneath it. There's no way around. At over 8,000 meters, in the thin air of the death zone, every step here is a gamble. Not just because of the altitude, but because the mountain is watching. It doesn't matter how strong you are, or how experienced. When the ice above starts to crack, no skill can save you. In 2008, the bottleneck became the stage for one of the worst disasters in mountaineering history. More than 24 climbers from multiple teams made a summit push that day. They had a plan, shared ropes, cooperation, a strict turnaround time. But the mountain had other ideas. Some ropes were misplaced, others disappeared. Communication broke down. People moved too slowly. By nightfall, everything had fallen apart. An avalanche from the serac swept across the route. Ropes were severed, climbers stranded, oxygen ran out, headlamps failed, radios went silent. 11 people died in a single night. Some fell, some froze, some were simply never seen again. It was chaos, but it was also K2, and it had happened before, and it would happen again. In the middle of the 2008 disaster, with bodies vanishing into darkness and voices fading on broken radios, one man refused to give up. His name was Pemba Gyalje Sherpa. When others turned back, he climbed higher, alone in the pitch-black cold, above 8,000 meters. He wasn't looking for a summit, he was looking for survivors. Pemba found climbers buried in snow, trapped without ropes, oxygen, or hope. One by one, he brought them down, dragging them through the death zone, risking his own life with every step. He saved at least 3 that night, and asked for nothing in return. Below him, Norwegian climber Cecilia Skog was searching for her husband, Rolf Bay. They'd climbed together, laughed together, dreamed together, but somewhere on that icy slope, a falling avalanche took him. She never saw him again, and still, she kept moving. Down the mountain, alone, broken, but alive. Others weren't so lucky. Irish climber Ger McDonnell had reached the summit hours earlier, but when the avalanche hit, he turned back up the mountain, not to escape, but to help. They found his body the next day. Heroism on K2 doesn't look like celebration, it looks like sacrifice. The mountain doesn't just test your strength, it tests your soul. And sometimes, it breaks it. When the sun finally rose after that night on K2, it didn't bring warmth. It brought silence. Tents sagged with snow, ropes flapped in the wind. Some climbers were still missing, others were frozen just meters from camp. The summit had been reached, yes, but no one was smiling, because on K2, reaching the top isn't the end. It's the beginning of your descent into reality. Those who survive rarely speak about the summit. They talk about the descent, the crippling fatigue, the numb fingers that won't clip a carabiner, the oxygen that runs out just when you need it most, the friend behind you who suddenly stops moving. They talk about that moment when you look back at the route you just climbed and realize how close you were to not making it. The summit of K2 is tiny, just enough space for a few boots, no flags, no grand vistas. Often the view is clouds, wind, and the whisper of death. You take your photo, if you can, and then you turn around, because you have to. Because the longer you stay, the closer the mountain gets to taking what it believes is already its. And when you finally return to base camp after days of survival mode, you expect relief. But what comes is something else. a quiet emptiness, a grief that doesn't have words, the knowledge that you made it, but others didn't. You remember their faces, the way they clipped into the rope, the last thing they said, and you wonder, why me? Some climbers never return to the mountains after K2, not because they're afraid, but because something inside them was left up there. Something they'll never get back, because this mountain doesn't just take lives, it takes pieces of you. And if you're lucky, it leaves enough behind for you to walk away. But one thing is certain, no one ever comes back from K2 the same. For most people, near-death experiences are something to avoid. But for high-altitude climbers, they're often the very reason they go. There's a question that hangs in the death zone, unspoken, but always present. What if this is the last step I ever take? And just as terrifying, what if it isn't? Because up there, everything is stripped away. The noise of life, the weight of routine, the digital distractions, they vanish. All that's left is you, your breath, and the mountain. For some, that silence is unbearable. For others, it's freedom. People think climbers chase adrenaline, but most aren't thrill seekers. They're not trying to cheat death. They're trying to feel life. And where else can you feel so alive? Because when you're standing one step away from losing everything, it's hard to explain to someone who's never been at that edge, who's never watched frost creep across their goggles, who's never felt their heartbeat slow while their feet dangle above a 1,000-meter drop. But for those who've been there, it's addictive. Not because it feels good, but because it feels real. Every second demands focus. Every decision matters. There's no pretending, no room for lies. It's just you and the truth. Some climbers describe it as spiritual. Others won't speak about it at all. But whether they admit it or not, many of them aren't just climbing toward the summit. They're climbing away from something else. Grief, guilt, emptiness, or just a life that felt too small. And when they reach that thin strip of sky, some of them find peace, others find only more questions, but all of them feel it, the pull of the void. There's a term climbers whisper about, summit fever. It sounds harmless, but it kills more people than storms or avalanches. Summit fever is the quiet voice that says, keep going, even when you know you should turn back. It's the illusion that the top is worth anything, even your life. And once that idea takes root, there's no turning around. Not without feeling like a failure. Not without carrying the weight of almost. That obsession, the need to reach the top, has taken seasoned climbers, experts with decades of experience, and left them frozen just sheer steps from the summit. They knew the risks, they had the skills, but they couldn't walk away. Why? Because climbing isn't just a sport. For many, it's a way of existing, a way to impose meaning on chaos, to feel control over something, anything. Some are chasing records, some chase recognition, some are trying to outrun a ghost, but for most, it's quieter than that. They're chasing a feeling, a moment of total presence, a stillness that life below can't offer. It's hard to replicate that kind of clarity, even harder to let it go. Climbers come down, they recover, rest, and then the mountain calls again. Sometimes it's Annapurna, sometimes K2, sometimes a peak they've already climbed. It doesn't matter. What matters is the need to feel small, to feel tested, to feel alive. The summit gives you that, but it also takes something with it every single time. And some climbers, they keep going back until the mountain takes everything. There's a line in the death zone, thin as a boot print, sharp as a blade. On one side is life, on the other is memory. Climbers talk about that line in quiet voices. The moment you realize you've pushed too far. When every step feels like a negotiation with your body, and your mind starts whispering things that don't make sense. At that altitude, oxygen isn't just low. It's almost gone. The brain swells, vision blurs. You forget where you are. You forget why you're there. Some hallucinate. Some sit down, just for a moment, and never get up again. Others keep walking, convinced they're almost there, when the summit is still hours away. High altitude cerebral edema, HACE, is what doctors call it. But on the mountain, it has simpler names. The fog, the drift, the moment you stop being you. And still, climbers accept it. Because the reward, if you survive, is indescribable. You come back with frostbitten fingers, a cough that won't quit, and a stare that never quite returns to normal. but you also come back with a story. A moment, a line crossed and somehow survived, and that feeling that you stood in the place where most people die and came back whole. It never leaves you. It becomes a part of you. Like the mountain, the death zone begins at 8,000 meters. Above that line, the human body starts to shut down, slowly, silently, and without mercy. There's still oxygen in the air, but it's not enough. At sea level, you breathe in 21% oxygen with every breath. Up here, it feels like 1/3 of that. Your lungs gasp, your brain stutters, your heartbeat races to make up for what's missing. But nothing works the way it should. Muscles lose strength, vision narrows, thoughts break apart like ice on a thawing river. Your body is dying. Every second spent in the death zone is borrowed time. Climbers move slowly, deliberately, because they have to. Even clipping into a rope feels like a chore. Boiling water takes hours. Swallowing food, often impossible. Your body doesn't care about fuel. It cares about surviving. And even then, it might not be enough. Frostbite creeps in quietly. Black fingertips, swollen feet. You don't notice until it's too late. Sleep becomes dangerous. Close your eyes too long, and you may never open them again. And yet, climbers push upward, knowing all of this. Because above the death zone, something else exists. A strange clarity, a feeling of absolute presence. A moment where the world below disappears. For some, it's worth it. For others, it becomes their final resting place. Frozen in place, just meters from their dream. Because in the death zone, there are no guarantees, only choices and consequences. In the death zone, not everyone comes down. And those who don't, stay. Their bodies become part of the landscape. Frozen in the positions they died, some sitting, some lying down, some still clipped to a rope. Eyes closed, faces wind-burned, boots half buried in snow. They are not hidden. They are there, on the route, visible reminders of what this place can take. Climbers pass them on the way up. Some nod silently in respect. Others can't bring themselves to look. They have names, stories, families still waiting for closure, but recovery isn't possible at this altitude. Helicopters can't fly here, and the effort to carry down a body could cost another life. So they remain, guardians of the mountain, warnings to those who follow. On Everest, there's a body known only as Green Boots, a landmark passed by nearly every climber on the northeast ridge. On K2 and Annapurna, many are never found at all, swallowed by avalanches, lost in crevasses, buried under years of snowfall. Some climbers request to be left if they die. They know the risk. They accept the silence, because in some way, for those who live and breathe the mountains, dying there isn't the worst thing. For them, the idea of being part of the place they loved most, to remain in that thin air among the peaks and clouds, is not tragedy. It's eternity. $50,000. That's what many climbers spend to reach the roof of the world. But the real cost, it isn't written in contracts or gear lists. It's paid in something far deeper. A guided climb on Everest runs between $45,000 and $90,000. Annapurna, around $35,000 to $40,000. K2, sometimes over $85,000 if you want a fast-track route with experienced Sherpas and oxygen support. And that's before flights, equipment, insurance, and the weeks of your life you'll spend at altitude. Training, acclimating, waiting. You're not just paying for the summit, you're paying for helicopters on standby, for high-altitude porters, for bottled oxygen, permits, and rescue teams you hope you'll never need. You're paying for a chance, nothing more. And even then, that chance might kill you. Climbers have sold homes to afford these expeditions, taken out loans, emptied retirement accounts. Some crowdfund, others work for years, quietly saving for one shot. They know the risks, they know the odds, but still, they go. Because for them, the money isn't the real sacrifice. It's the commitment, the willingness to give everything, comfort, safety, time, for one perfect moment above the clouds. And when that moment comes, for the lucky few who live to feel it, there's no regret, only awe and silence. And the sudden, overwhelming knowledge that you are both impossibly small and impossibly alive. No one returns from a summit the same. Even if they descend with all their fingers, with their lives intact and their lungs still working, something is different, because the mountain doesn't just test your body, it strips it down. And in that exposure, something changes. Some climbers come home quieter, more thoughtful. Their gaze lingers longer. They speak slower, if at all, about what they saw up there. Others struggle to adjust. They sit in crowded rooms, haunted by the stillness of the high peaks. They lie awake, reliving the sound of boots crunching on ice, the hiss of oxygen, the silence after someone stops answering the radio. Families notice the change, even if they can't name it. A distance, a heaviness. Not depression, not trauma, just something left behind. Because climbing a deadly mountain is more than reaching the top. It's a reckoning. You confront fear. You face weakness. You see what you are when there's nothing left but you and gravity. Some people find clarity, others find ghosts. And sometimes, what the mountain gives you isn't peace. It's permission. Permission to live differently. To stop pretending. To let go of the noise and remember what matters, or sometimes it just gives you silence. And that too can be enough. There are no trophies at the top of Annapurna, no medals waiting on K2's summit, no crowds cheering when you return from Everest's death zone. What you get, if you're lucky, is survival. And maybe a name remembered in whispers. The mountains don't care who you are, but people do. And in the world of high-altitude climbing, legacy matters. Not because of ego, but because of what it takes to earn it. Names like Reinhold Messner, Jerzy Kukuczka, Wanda Rutkiewicz, Willie Steck. These aren't just climbers. They're myths carved into the ice. Stories told in base camps, in books, in the eyes of those who follow their steps. But legacy isn't just about firsts or records. It's about the moments people don't see. The climber who gives up their summit to save someone else. The Sherpa who leads through a storm without question. The quiet decision to turn back, knowing it could save your life, even if it costs you your dream. Sometimes, legacy is built in death. Sometimes, in the decision not to die. And sometimes, it's left on the mountain, unnamed and unmapped, buried beneath the snow where only the wind remembers. Because in the high places, it's not about fame. It's about truth. And the mountains, they always tell the truth. There's a slope on Annapurna where Anatoly Bukriv disappeared. A crevasse on K2 where Rolf Bay vanished beneath falling ice. A ridge on Everest where bodies still lie, frozen mid-step, their last breath trapped in the silence. These are the names we know, but there are many we don't. Climbers who didn't make headlines, guides who never came home, dreamers who vanished into white. For every summit photo that circles the internet, there are phone calls that were never returned. Wives who waited, sons who grew up without fathers, mothers still holding on to that last message. Almost there. Mountains don't mourn, but we do. And while the world moves on, the high places carry every loss. In memorial walls built from stone, in gear abandoned in the snow, in names etched into rock with trembling hands, some climbers leave letters before they ascend, just in case. They don't say goodbye. They say, if I don't come back, know that I was where I wanted to be. Because for them, this isn't tragedy, it's purpose. They weren't running toward death. They were chasing something bigger than fear. And in their final moments, above the clouds, surrounded by silence, they found it. Not every story ends in rescue, but every one of them mattered. And that's why we remember. That's why we tell their stories. Because in those final steps, they carried something we all feel, but rarely face. The need to know what we're truly made of, even if it costs us everything. So why do people spend $50,000 to die in the death zone? Why do they climb toward a place where the air is too thin to breathe? Where the cold gnaws through bone? Where one slip, one breath, one heartbeat could be the last? The answer is never simple. Some go to prove something, to themselves, to someone who once said they couldn't. To chase a moment that matters in a world full of noise. Others go because they're searching for silence. Because the mountains don't ask questions. They don't judge. They just exist. Unmoving, eternal, daring you to rise to them. And some go because it's the only place they've ever felt alive. They know the risks. They've read the stories. They've seen the bodies in the snow. But they also know this. There are things worse than death. Regret. A life never tested. A dream never followed. In the death zone, there are no lies. Only truth, raw, immediate, unforgiving, and for a few fleeting hours, On the roof of the world, some people find what they've been looking for all along. Not fame, not victory, but peace. Because in that thin air where every breath is a fight, they become weightless. Just a heartbeat and the sky. And for some, that's worth everything.